The 2024 FCS playoffs are finally here. The selection committee has revealed the 2014 field and the bracket to go along with it. That said, it's time for my bracket predictions, where I predict the winners of every game from the first round all the way through the championship. We'll start there in that first round, where we have to keep in mind that this is the first year that teams seeded 9 through 16 will be seeded. That means those teams will host games, but I do see 3 of those teams losing at home. Here are the teams I think will win on the road. Up first, I have UT Martin. I think UT Martin can knock off New Hampshire because New Hampshire has the worst run offense in the CAA. I think UT Martin will be able to make the Wildcats one-dimensional and pull off the win. Up next, I go to Southeast Missouri State. I think Southeast Missouri State has one of them ones at the quarterback position in Paxton DeLauren. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the FCS, especially when he's on his game. And I think he will be on his game against an Illinois State pass defense that ranks in the bottom half of the Missouri Valley Football Conference. Lastly, my last road team to pull off the upset win will be Northern Arizona. NAU has a quarterback in Ty Pennington who is a dual threat. If you look at Abilene Christian's losses, one of those losses to North Alabama, they could not stop the dual threat QB. I think Ty Pennington will have his way with that Abilene Christian defense, causing a lot of different fits for them. I think that will be why Northern Arizona wins, regardless of whether or not McIver returns from that second half he missed for ACU. Up next, we go to the second round. That's where I want to look at 4 key matchups. Up first, we go to Idaho versus Richmond. In that matchup, I like Idaho to win this game because Idaho has been battle-tested all season long, overcoming injuries to quarterback. They're healthier now, and I think Richmond hasn't had the most difficult schedule in that CAA slate. Because of Idaho's ability to win games, difficult games at that, I think they win that game. Up next, we go to a national championship rematch from last year. That would be South Dakota State versus Montana. These are not the same 2 teams as last year. There's new players on both sides of the ball. However, I think South Dakota State is the better team here, and I think Montana's quarterback issues and controversy, battle, whatever you want to call it, will come back to bite them against a team with the reigning Walter Payton Award winner. Next, we go to Mercer in Rhode Island. This one I think will be all about defense. Mercer has one of the best defenses in the FCS, and I think it will show in this playoff game. Lastly, the one upset I have here is I have Villanova beating UIW. And this is because I don't think UIW has played anyone. They haven't had the hardest schedule this year where they had to beat a team. They haven't been faced with a team like Villanova that's very good that they have beaten yet. And I think Villanova, Connor Watkins will play up to par. He will play at his best in this game, and I think they will win this game against a very talented UIW team. Now we get to the quarterfinal round. That's where I have Montana State beating Idaho. We saw that matchup in the regular season, and I think the talent difference and the way that happened on the field, it was just too wide of a gap. I know it's hard to beat teams twice, but on the field in that game, I don't see Idaho being able to close that gap in the playoffs, especially with all that's at stake. Then I have North Dakota State and South Dakota State both winning their games. I think both of those 2 teams are the better teams, 2 of the better teams in the FCS, and I think they'll just be outmatched against their opponents, and they will overpower them and win those games, probably by multiple scores. But the game I think will be the closest in that quarterfinal round will be UC Davis versus South Dakota. And in this game, I look back to UC Davis's loss against Montana State. That's a game where quarterback Miles Hastings was sacked 6 times. UC Davis has allowed 24 sacks on the season. South Dakota is one of the best teams in the Missouri Valley Football Conference and in the entire FCS at getting after the quarterback, whether that's QB hurries, sacks, pressures, tackles for loss, whatever. South Dakota can get in that backfield, and I think that will be the difference in this game. A game that should be close. There's talent on both sides, but I think when it comes down to it, being able to get after that quarterback, harass that quarterback, make plays in the backfield will be why South Dakota wins this game. We're now in the semifinal round. That's where I see a matchup between Montana State versus South Dakota and a rematch of the Dakota marker, South Dakota State versus North Dakota State. Of course, South Dakota State will be heading back to the Fargo Dome, a place where they lost by 1 possession in that final 4th quarter drive there. It's hard for a team to lose to the same team twice, especially when both teams are pretty evenly matched. I think South Dakota State will figure out a way to win this one because that last game was so close. It's just a balance of the odds there. In the top of the bracket, Montana State, South Dakota. The way Montana State has been dominating their opponents so far this season, I think it continues here. I think Montana State has just been not playing good teams close. They've been coming out very fast and very dominant against other elite FCS teams, and I think it shows there in that semifinal round. Now we get to the national championship game. That's Montana State versus South Dakota State. Will South Dakota State be able to three-peat? I think they will. I think South Dakota State versus Montana State will come down to stopping that run game. And I think South Dakota State, with Adam Bach at linebacker, a lot of those good DBs that will allow them to leave their corners on those islands, have extra people in the box to stop that run. I think South Dakota State will be able to stop the run of Montana State. And I think that will be the difference in this game. I think South Dakota State can run the ball effectively as well. And I think they'll be able to get just enough stops of that Montana State run game, which is elite, to win the national championship. So there you have it, my FCS bracket predictions from the first round to the championship. I have South Dakota State three-peating this year in 2024.